and let's start this quick session. Again, my name is Nurs. I'm from FunnelFox, um, and we're here to talk about the engine room of your business in Web to App, which would be payments infrastructure, and basically, if you're scaling at web funnels, if you're scaling web funnel, maybe you've realized that at the scale of, let's say, uh, 20K, 50K a month, something works a little bit differently. Um, the funnels, your creatives, your user acquisition is not the only driver of the sales, of the success, but also the payments are. And sometimes when you scale beyond some certain numbers, things might break in the payment section, and we do see this kind of pattern constantly, unfortunately, where teams build some kind of great funnels, traffic scales up, but suddenly revenue drops. Acceptance rate, they go down, renewals fail, and then the, let's say, the worst nightmare, worst case scenario, your Stripe account bans or maybe freezes your account. And let's talk about how to prevent that kind of bans, that kind of crash in operations, how to structure your payment infrastructure, and then what kind of strategies you can use to recover revenue even if the payments didn't go through. Um, so if something's wrong with the payment part, it might be pretty different thing, right? Let's see, the pretty usual setup is that we have a Stripe account because it's really easy to set up. It has a good conversion rate. It has good acceptance rate, and you don't have to spend a lot of money just to set it up. It doesn't require any kind of volumes like 10 millions a year, for example. But for web to app business, this is uh, risky PSP because the risk models kind of aggressive. And if you have a lot of chargebacks, if you have a lot of frauds, or maybe technical issues with the payments, like charging the same user 2 times, 3 times, this might lead to blockage of your Stripe account, which is kind of a disaster. Because let's take a look at this picture, a graph here. It is the monthly revenue of an app from a pretty risky new category. And they started scaling in April, scaled in May, pretty good, everything was perfect. Crazily scaled in June, and then bam, we see in July here that the revenue dropped to like 60%, something ish, because they got banned in mid July. And you see August revenues, 99% less than compared to June. And the crazy part is that all subscriptions are in Stripe, so they won't be rebuilt to next periods. Your LTV would be pretty low. Your user acquisition campaigns might break pretty easily because you gotta feed them with constant signals of purchase, of course. And this is terrible. This is really bad, and you want to avoid this kind of strategies. And what to do to not get banned in Stripe or maybe in some other PSPs, but mainly Stripe, just because most of us use Stripe in web funnels. So the first small tip would be small, but still really important tip would be using some kind of chargeback prevention tool, because chargeback rates, along with fraud rates, really affects your Stripe account, affects its ability to um, to process the payments. And of course the banks will have low trust in your merchant account if your chargeback history is pretty bad. So integrate some kind of tools. There are tons of them. What they do is they have some kind of dispute alerting system where they catch the alerts before they reach to Stripe, before they become dispute, and then they refund the transaction and then cancel the subscription. So you're kind of safe here. The second tip would be around descriptor and cancellation flows. Smart, the statement descriptors. I've seen that some of the customers of ours, some of the clients I work with, they don't really care about what's happening with this statement descriptor. They leave their legal names in there, and I think it is kind of a mistake because the statement descriptor is pretty much what users see in their bank statement when they see a charge of $30. Let's say sudden charge of $30. They didn't really commit because it was a paid trial from $1 a week, for example. And if it's unclear, if they're not able to identify what kind of product they purchased, they might think it is fraud, for example, right? They might not recognize the purchase, and then they might want to try to Google your support, your product, but they're not able to do so. That's why they just reach out to bank, claim a fraud, claim a dispute, and then you gotta handle that part as well. But really small tip is just to make sure that your descriptor is there, it's clear, it's people can Google it and find your support page and then reach out to you for refund if they want, instead of going to bank, claiming a dispute, and then you gotta handle the dispute and pay dispute fees, refund the money anyways, and stuff. Um, Same goes with the cancellation flows. You gotta give users an option to cancel their subscriptions because this lowers disputes for pretty much the same reasons. Because with Stripe, you're not obligated to send any kind of emails to customers. It doesn't automatically send renewal emails, and the options to cancel. You got to think about that and build some ways for customers to cancel their subscriptions. This might also have some kind of side effects, like positive side effects, where you can control how they cancel their subscription. You can still offer them the discounts. You can still offer them some kind of free period, or maybe you can ask them to pause the subscription, um, or maybe just let them cancel. It's all right. um, and of course, the third one is the most important advice I can give you today is not to rely on a single PSP, not to rely on a single Stripe account you have, even if you're small, around, let's say, 30K a month subscription business. Uh, what they say is that pretty much just don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? If Stripe handles your payments and then the subscription logic lives in Stripe, you pretty much lose everything if you get banned. The solution here is pretty simple and complex at the same time, depending on how you're going to use that. Is just to use routine or orchestration or tokenization when it comes to separating your tokens from Stripe only, let's say. So you need to store these tokens in a neutral third-party vault or maybe some kind of billing layer. There are several orchestrators in the market. You can use them with your payment system. You can still connect your Stripe account to there, or maybe you can also connect your checkout or Adyen account. So even if Stripe bans you this time, this allows you to swap the first payment transactions, right? The live funnels you run ads to, and renewals to different payment provider like checkout.com again. Without, users wouldn't know anything, and your renewals and subscriptions would be, going on. Nothing too bad happens. Of course, there are some side effects of getting banned by Stripe anyways, but still, at least you won't lose your subscriptions. They will be rebuilt for the further periods. Your LTV stays pretty much the same as you would expect. Um, and yeah, this doesn't affect any kind of operational losses. Of course, the money losses, the campaigns, on the UA campaigns, I mean, in Meta. Um, and just to talk about orchestration, let's circle back on what happens when users click pay. Usually, of course, they land to your funnel, they click pay, the transaction goes to your payment service provider, let's say Stripe, and then that goes to some kind of acquirer that connects that payment service provider, you as I mentioned, with some networks like Mastercard or Visa, and then that goes to issuing bank of the user, right? While this is like kind of a traditional system you might have if you only have Stripe account. While with orchestration, you have a control on your payment flow. So see, this is pretty much the same, but um, instead of merchant as you select in Stripe only, just to make the purchase, to charge the user. I'm sorry. You are able to control that and route users depending on several parameters, several scenarios to different kind of payment providers. Let's say you want to charge US users with a US Stripe account, or maybe you want to charge some local Brazilian users with a payment provider that supports local payment method, which is Pix, for example. Or maybe you just want to have several payment providers just to make sure everything will be good when you scale to a couple of $1 million a month. And this is pretty important because, um, again, even if Stripe bans you, you don't have to worry about a lot of things. And this also, um, this also affects both first payment transactions and renewals because when we check the metrics for first payment transactions, let's say in Stripe, you can go to payment analytics. I think it's like payment success rate. You would see around 80% for the USA, or maybe 90%, which is pretty good. But when you click for renewals, you might see 30%, maybe 25%, which is pretty low. You might ask, what's going on? Banks approve my first transaction. Why did not approve my second transaction or my third transaction? And there are a couple of reasons. Of course, there are much more reasons than it's written here, but I'll just cover a couple of them. First would be pretty simple, is that users don't have enough money on their bank account. They don't have $30 you're trying to charge. And this is kind of an expected behavior if you just check your Stripe account. Again, in analytics, you go to decline rates or something like that, and you see that the insufficient funds takes up to maybe 40%. It's kind of okay. It's better than, let's say, do not honor type of errors, or maybe transaction not allowed, and maybe generic declines. Um, because you can still work with insufficient funds here. How? Is just using smart retries. Let's say you charge $30 for, let's say $20 a month is kind of standard price. The first transaction went well, all good. Second transaction just failed because of insufficient funds. You can enable rules where you say something like, if the transaction fails, wait for maybe 3 days, try again, try the same amount of $20. If that fail again, maybe try $15 instead. At the same time, you will still give your users access, meaning some kind of grace period, as you might do in your traditional in-app subscriptions, for example. And then you might want to try $10 instead of 20 if 15 didn't help. And of course, you are given some discounts, but the good part is that you are recovering money, right? You didn't just stop at the first try. these users might renew to the third month, for example, and then pay $20 in the third month. We'll talk about retries in 5 minutes, I think. But this is usually what our customers do. And also Stripe has the retry schemes, I think up to 12 retries or something like that, but it's not really customizable. Um, and of course, the second reason would be chargebacks and fraud history of your Stripe account, of your merchant account. If subscription terms are unclear, this might lead to chargeback because users again don't understand why are they being charged $30 instead of $1 that they paid a week ago with paid trials, right? So again, make sure you have some kind of pre-dispute alerting tool. Make sure to enable Stripe Radar, for example, uh, and then maybe enable some kind of third-party fraud prevention tools. Also, there is something like related to fraud prevention, something like network tokenization, which we will talk about in 5 minutes again. But let's just remember that for now. Um, Bank level blocking is not really obvious for everyone actually, because when banks decline your transactions, they might flag your merchant account or maybe your merchant category code as risky, and then they might just ban you. Maybe even some certain banks in certain countries that you rely on. One particular example is my teammate shared last week. He said that they had this particular really big Turkish bank, which had a 5% of chargeback rate with this merchant, with this, with this app, let's say. And then bank just blocked this merchant. So no transaction go through this bank at all. And of course, the renewals will drop really hard. And at this stage, you would see that, of course, the acceptance rate, like let's say overall acceptance rate, is kind of okay. But if you want to check, detailed analytics, you might want to consider checking bank level analytics, or let's say bean level analytics, just to track and just to check if you don't have any kind of suspiciously low acceptance rates in some particular banks. If you do have that, you might want to use some, again, the additional payment provider. Um, and the cross-border transactions might be a little bit controversial here because this is related with the last one, which is merchant account age. So the claim is pretty simple. If, let's say, your users are in the US and your Stripe account is in the UK, or let's say in somewhere in Europe, in Poland, and what happens is that when European merchant tries to charge US issued cards, let's pretty much US users, this might lead to more declines just because US banks would consider this as an abroad transaction, like cross-border transaction, and might decline them if they don't know your merchant very well, right? Which is again about merchant account age. We do see cases where, let's say, Spanish Stripe account is charging US customers for a couple of years already. They have pretty good chargeback and fraud history. They're not, doing some kind of weird business, some kind of grayed out sound, let's say. Um, and they do have around 85% acceptance rate for the first payments, or maybe the acceptable for them, the acceptance rate for renewals, just because US banks know these merchants and they do trust them enough uh, just to allow this transaction to happen. Um, yeah, so smart retries I talked about could help you with renewals. Again, if pretty simple thing. If payments didn't go through, try again, but try it dynamically, try to charge amount with some kind of discount, or maybe try to charge them on Fridays instead of on Saturdays if the renewal day comes to Saturday, for example, or maybe charge them during their bank working day, pretty much from 9 to 5. This might increase acceptance rate as well. Um, Pretty much, this is about renewals because you can't control when to charge the first payments, right? And the second option is fallbacks, have meaning the again simple as well. You have Stripe as a first attempt. Let's say your US Stripe account. If the transaction didn't go through, you just try with checkout or maybe at the end. And eventually something might work out if the problem is with your PSP, for example, if banks don't trust it enough. Um, and tokenization, let's talk about that again. Um, so, pretty much the idea of orchestrating, the idea of not dependent in one PSP like Stripe, for example, is to tokenize is to just to have the tokenization, right? There's some kind of let's say provider level tokenization and network level tokenization. You can still enable network level tokenization in Stripe directly, and the price would be is that it has higher acceptance rate and lower fraud rate. I think acceptance rate is around maybe like 5% more, not too much, but the fraud rate might decline 30%, up to 30%. And we remember that if you have good fraud rate history, your acceptance rate would be, good as well, as like one of the points why your acceptance rate might be good or not. Um, and some other bonuses of network tokenizations is that it automatically updates the tokens when the card expires or reused. So it's like pretty good strategy for renewals, for long-term renewals as well, meaning that payments wouldn't fail due to expired card, due to new card number if they reissue. Um, yeah, so pretty good thing. Um, and all these things, like let's say not depending on Stripe, having second payment provider as a fallback, using some kind of retry, having your subscriptions outside of Stripe, because I did mention that, but if you want to use Stripe just for the transactions and want to move your subscriptions outside of Stripe, you need to build it in house, right? You need to build a tool that controls how users are being built with the upgrades, with the downgrades, with some kind of upsell mechanics, with free trials, paid trials, this kind of smart retries, schedules, and subscription migrations, cancellations, all of the things. We can build that in day or two. Maybe you can build that in a half a year or in a year, but you can use the tools that provide that. Of course, that might be FunnelFox billing, which will cover everything I've talked about today. Um, Again, not depending on the single PSP, having some kind of pre-dispute alerting tool, routing users, routing payments depending on different conditions, depending on let's say on countries, because we have one customer we set up the workflow just a couple of days ago where they charge in US customers with US Stripe account, and then they charge in some Singaporean customers with Singaporean Stripe account. And this kind of routing, this kind of flows overall, again, help your acceptance rate, uh, help your business when, if or when Stripe bans your account, so you're not dependent on it anymore. Um, and it recovers some kind of revenue due to smart retries, due to cascading, or like these fallbacks I've talked about. And And yeah, pretty much it. We can talk about it more, let's say on LinkedIn, if you maybe follow me, if you have a contact with me in Slack, or maybe you can email me if you have questions, not only about FunnelFox billing, but also maybe your Stripe account. We can have a call and check the health of your Stripe account, for example. Or if you're interested in this kind of billing solution, if you're scaling beyond 50K a month, you're thinking about what happens if Stripe bans you, if that picture is pretty scary, feel free to book in a call. We could talk. We could, yeah, pretty much talk and talk about what kind of solution you might have with that. Um, that's pretty much it from me. We'll have some time for Q&A if you have any kind of questions. If you don't have any kind of questions, still follow up, please. Um, we will send this recording again today or maybe tomorrow. So I'll just wait for a couple of minutes here if you have any questions. Um, Yeah, so setting up orchestration, it really depends, right? If you want to build the everything in-house, let's say there are several orchestrating tools. Let's say Primer, you have Primer, but you want to build your um, subscription engine, and that's the tricky part as well. With FunnelFox billing, you can do it pretty much, pretty fast, just a couple of days. You connect your Stripe. We have a clear documentation on that, and you just go and launch. But yeah, are refunds different from dispute for Stripe account karma? Yes, refunds are safe. Uh, yeah, relatively safe. Pretty much safer than disputes or chargebacks or fraud. And you have a dispute rate statistics and fraud rate statistics in um, in your Stripe account, and there are some kind of thresholds like the benchmarks that your fraud rate shouldn't go beyond. Uh, I don't quite remember, like 1% or something like that. I do have a post on my LinkedIn if you want to follow that and check. Um, or I might want to follow up later on the exact benchmarks. But again, refunds are fine. Just don't let dispute happens. Um, Thanks, Ksenia. May I wonder if you have any recommendations on what should be done in case a certain issuer declines all your payment attempts, just blocking the bin? Regarding the orchestration as well, how do you deal with Apple Pay? And is it technically possible to move them around mids? Um, yes, let's start with the last one. Yes, it is possible to move around the tokens, even if you're migrating from Stripe to some orchestrator, for example. It depends on the orchestrator. Some of them can move card tokens only. Some of them can move, migrate Apple Pay tokens as well. So you can move that. You can build. You can match that with the subscription data and try to successfully launch it in the new, let's say, new PSP, new orchestrator. But you need to be careful on that as well because you need to check whether these payments would renew at the the same renewal level you used to have before. And then let's say you migrated your monthly subscriptions from previous month. You gotta check how do they renew this month, and then how do they renew next month, and maybe one more month, but it's not really necessary. And then that will be just, let's say, 10% of users from your previous Stripe account. And then if everything's all right with this technical setup, you move the other 90% of your subscribers from the Stripe account. So it is possible. People do that, of course. It just takes more time. Sometimes if you are at lower volumes, like not a couple of $1 million, we just suggest leaving all subscribers in Stripe and charging new subscribers using orchestration. Um, What should be done in case of certain issuer declines all repayment attempts? Well, you can use fallbacks. You can use checkout.com, for example, and try to charge with checkout.com. Okay, and the question: what chargeback rate is considered dangerous with Stripe, and what threshold does Stripe typically suspend or terminate accounts? Also, can we recover do not honor declines using payment orchestration? The last one, I do love starting with the last one, but the last one, um, do not honor could contain pretty much everything. This could contain insufficient funds. This could contain uh, the hidden message that this was a prepaid card, it just didn't have money, let's say. Or generally, do not honor means that your bank, the user's bank, don't trust your merchant account. And you got to do the things that we've mentioned today, or maybe try some new fresh accounts as well. Um, Also, this depends on the audience, of course, right? If you're starting like worldwide campaign, you might have lower acceptance rates in some regions, which is expected. When we talk about acceptance rates of 80 or 90% for the first transactions, we talk about US users mainly, just with some other benchmarks with conversion to purchase, etc. Um, Chargeback rate, what's dangerous? Okay, let me open up my LinkedIn account. Sorry. Um, well, with the chargeback, just a second. Well, with the dispute rates, let's say the healthy is between 0 and 0.3%, which is normal, depends on your volume, of course, and you might receive some kind of early risk signals if it's up to 0.5%, 0.6%, and if it's more than 0.6%, this is where becomes pretty risky. If it's more than 1% or maybe even 2, the dispute level, you might want to, you might be in the monitoring systems, meaning banks might start trusting you less, and even Stripe could add some kind of restrictions as well. um, can you orchestrate any PSP, or there's some list? That depends on the orchestrator totally. Let's say with primary, you can just check their integration on their website, and some other orchestrators, they're pretty much the same. They don't typically work with merchant of records mainly, but they do work with simple PSPs. Um, can you somehow detect and filter out low quality transactions, prepaid cards, banks that are well known for issues with subscriptions? Yes, you can do that. Um, Pretty simple. You might want to show simple messages. You just hard decline these kind of prepaid cards, hard decline some kind of list of banks, and then say that, all right, sorry, this card doesn't work. Maybe try again with some different card. This works as well. Good question, by the way, because we might have some cases where prepaid cards go with 30% of your initial payments, usually with banks like, I think, Sutton Bank in the US. um, yes, you can block prepaid cards. You can customize the error saying that, um, sorry, we don't accept prepaid cards, or maybe we don't accept this card, please try again with a different card. Because prepaid cards, let me explain the issue with the prepaid cards for the rest of us. They typically don't renew. If you have paid trials or maybe even free trials, people get the first week for free or maybe for $1, and then usually they don't renew, which is pretty bad for your LTV. Um, yeah. All right. Any more questions? Uh, all right. Yeah. Thanks for attending the webinar. I think we'll have a couple of more on the payment topic, maybe on the funnels, maybe some other topics. Um, Follow me on LinkedIn. Check out the FunnelFox billing. Think about your payment solutions if you're scaling, and yeah, have some safe payments and great conversion rates. Yeah. Bye bye. Thank you.